John Edward achieved fame as a psychic medium, using his abilities to connect people with other side energies for nearly 40 years. FBI agent Robert Hilland reached out to Edward in 1998 for assistance on a cold case. Their new book, Chasing Evil, recounts that meeting and the subsequent 25-year crime-solving partnership. We'll be discussing the book, their fascinating careers, and more in this Newsday Live Long Island LitFest conversation from Newsday Studios. Please welcome John Edward and Robert Hilland.
Welcome. How you guys feeling? Excellent, excellent. Welcome to Newsday Live Studios. Thank you so much for being here. Also, thank you to our Long Island LitFest partners for also being here. I have some exciting news for you. I'm going to share this right now. Although this just debuted, it's already a New York Times bestseller. John Edward, Robert Hilland, thank you so much for being here. Now, my first thing that I want to tell you is when I read this book, okay, I didn't know what to expect going into the book. And then I read it in 2 days. I couldn't put it down. I was on vacation. I was on the beach. I couldn't tell you what color the water was because I was reading this book. Okay. It was an excellent, excellent read. I'm not just telling you that. It's fantastic. So a lot of times the book on the back will tell you a little bit about what it is. But I wanted you to tell me in your own words. I'll start with you, John. What is this book about?
I think the book is about a 3-decade reveal of a partnership that was decided upon in the beginning to be clandestine and not to kind of like talk about. That is I'm going to use the word a transformational journey. A transformational journey and a reveal about not just supernatural and crime coming together, but what our journey was on a personal level as well by the end of it.
Bob, same question?
Yeah, I think I would echo that. I would just add to it, it's a journey for me professionally and personally, right? The book reveals I'm the last guy in the world that will be talking to a psychic. I am not that guy. So for me, going from this is complete nonsense to where I am today, he's a brother of mine, and my personal journey is reflected in the book and the sacrifice. It's not just about the cases, but it's about letting people feel part of these cases and be on that journey with me.
You know, I want to talk about, I have an excerpt here just to paint the picture of, I guess, how not quite easy it was for you guys to make that connection and kind of where you stood when you were first hearing about John Edward. And this is right from the book, his words. My reaction to Edward's voice. Now you're hearing this on the radio. This is the third time you've heard this voice on the radio, and this is what you wrote. My reaction to Edward's voice this third time was visceral. Like a pair of hands were grabbing my insides and twisting them. Like I wanted to wring this guy's neck with my own bare hands. How has that changed?
Well, sometimes I still want to wring his neck, but well, again, from that perspective, I thought he was taking advantage of people going through the grieving process. And I felt that the first day I met him. There was a young couple coming out of his room, and I saw this young couple with their child who were crying, and I felt that pull, like, oh man, I'm gonna expose this guy, and that's gonna be the end of this. So how do I think of him now? I trust him with my life, and that took time, right? It wasn't like I just jumped in the pool. I'm a man that questions everything, but the things that happened were undeniable. So if John calls me, and he does oftentimes, and he gives me a warning or heads up, I don't question anymore. I used to.
John, did you see it going this way?
No, not even a little bit. When I first knew that he had reached out, I thought he had reached out multiple times, and only through us doing this did I discover he reached out only once. But it was my office that was like pressing me to meet with him. So I was like, I don't even know if I could do this. Like, my dad was a New York City cop who was like, don't work with the police. Like, just don't do that. I was like, yeah, no problem. It's not really my lane. So when this came about, I was like, sure, let me try. And my first meeting with him was kind of like similar. I had an untrusting kind of a vibe. I wasn't sure why he was coming. He came with a police officer as well. So it was like 2 people in the room. And this was me trying to stretch. So I think that I'm always a student of this work. I'm always a student of the universe. And class was in session, and he was my teacher.
Now, what else made it so difficult, or why were you so cautious going into this relationship?
I think it's obvious, right? Last thing I want to be is a fool, right? So, you know, my perspective is he was going to reveal himself as a charlatan, or in best case scenario, he was going to be able to help me with this case. That was my thought at the time.
Spoiler, they end up working it out. Just letting you know. Now, in the book, Bob, you talk about both the darker and the lighter parts of humanity. Mm-hmm. How important was it to highlight both those sides?
I think you can't have one without the other, right? I think it's fair to say my journey taught me that you find good where you least expect it, and sometimes you find evil where you least expect it, right? So, and I've been asked the question, what is evil? I don't have an answer for that. All I can tell you is I've worked many, many cases, more without John than with him, but most cases people make bad decisions and they get themselves jammed up, and now I'm investigating them. But there's other cases, some of which are reflected in the book, where when you're sitting across from that person for hours interrogating them and talking to them, it feels different. The energy feels different. It tastes different, it feels different. It has a different aura about it.
Now, you spoke about stretching. With this relationship, how did you stretch? Where did you find yourself?
I found myself intrigued. That's like, I think to do this work, you have to be a little bit nosy. And I kind of am nosy in my readings. Like, I want to know who I'm connected with. I want to know more. I want details. And then I want to validate the details that come through. So this provided an opportunity in a different way. Like, there wasn't a personal connection to Bob, meaning Bob wasn't connected to the people on a personal level. A lot of times if I'm reading for somebody, there'll be crimes, criminal things that take place. They don't have the perspective of being objective. They're biased because I'm talking about their loved one. I'm talking about the person that they're connected to who might have passed at the hands of somebody else. So their objectivity is not there. They're subjective to the person who's passed in that, let's say, crime. Bob had complete objectivity. He was just looking for facts. He was looking for information. And when I read, I try to read in a very surgical way, just taking the emotion out of it, looking for facts and looking for details. So our working styles is investigative, and it kind of came together nicely.
I wanted to ask, what's the difference in your psychic process when it came to this compared to just meeting with somebody?
Same. I approach it in the same exact way. Every time I'm going to work with somebody, I like to have no bias, right? I want a blank slate. And then whatever it is that I'm seeing, hearing, and feeling, I'm going to then impart to the person that I'm working with for them to validate and confirm so I can move on to what's next. And what that does, it gives me the opportunity to build up a trust in who's coming through or what I'm actually perceiving psychically. Because there's two different aspects of the work, right? So if I'm reading for somebody, if I'm going to read for you, I could talk to you about what's happening now in your life and what's coming up for you. I'm going to do that on a psychic level. But if I'm talking to you about people who have crossed over, that's now on a mediumship level. So there's two different kind of ways of, it's like drive and reverse. There's two different ways of me kind of operating. With Bob, I operated primarily psychically.
And Bob, when it came to this evolution, he had to stretch. How did you have to stretch? Because you're across the table from usually doing the interrogations, but now you're being told.
He still was. Don't make no mistakes.
And now you have to listen. You have to really adapt. How is that?
Well, it was different than anything I had experienced previously. I think I could best define it as, you know, as a young guy, maybe people can relate to this. The world was black and white to me. It was easy to put people or situations in categories. John taught me to question my assumptions and to think outside the box, and that was an evolution, and not just the first case, but the first case led to the next and the next and the next. And I think for me the biggest thing I learned was there were times, some of which are reflected in the book, where John would give me a symbol of something. He would say, hey, when you're in this country on this mission, look for a soccer ball, look for something. And I would say, what are you talking about? And I never once went out to prove John Edward. I went to solve the case. But then when that thing manifested, the logical side of my brain would try to explain it away. Oh, that's just a coincidence. That's that. But that soccer ball was very significant to the case. So the point I'm making is over that journey, when John gave me those symbols, I embraced them now and I accepted them. And when they appeared, it was like, okay, I'm on the right path.
And those symbols sometimes, to you, John, you mentioned, don't make much sense in the moment. Could you explain a little bit about that?
Whether I'm working with Bob or anybody else, there are many times that I'll see stuff and I completely understand what to say. And then there are moments where I'm like, I don't know what this is, but I need you to remember it. And then I'll tell them exactly what I'm seeing, hearing, and feeling, and why I'm saying that, in case I go down the wrong path. They have the actual information of what came through, because they know their family better than I do. And oftentimes it's something that's a future moment that's going to take place.
What was it like to tell your friends when you finally opened up, for either of you, that you're working with the FBI or you're working with the psychic? Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, well, for me, the FBI didn't know, right? So I kept, right? For many reasons. Number one, the FBI does not consult with psychics. We're the Federal Bureau of Investigation, not the Federal Bureau of Psychics. And I didn't want to lose my own credibility. My reputation was important to me. However, having said that, big FBI didn't know. There were times, which are described in the case, where events unfolded in the presence of my colleagues. Sometimes I could create ambiguous cover stories to explain it away, but there were 2 or 3 times in my career where my colleagues had first-hand seats to what was going on. They would say, how did you know to look there? How did you know to do this? And lucky guess was not good enough an answer, right? So they learned of it, and you might imagine some of them were like, wow, this is incredible, this is miraculous, and we should use him. And others were like, you're out of your mind, right? So.
And John, what was it like when you opened up about working with the FBI? Because you had mentioned that you're not supposed to work with police, you're not supposed to work with cops. You heard that from your dad.
I didn't really tell anybody. The fun part for me now, where there are people that are on television shows that I did Crossing Over for 4 years. Bob made some guest appearances at the studio, and they just assumed, because at the time I was getting death threats, I was getting a lot of serious negativity was coming at me because the show was like the first of its kind, and they just assumed that this gentleman was law enforcement and he was there to kind of help protect us, the show. And now I'm getting like emails from the producers going, oh my God, like that was happening the entire time. And I was like, and the thing, the caveat, and we were talking about this, is that, you know, I came under a lot of attacks, like multiple attacks when Crossing Over first hit the airwaves. And I think what people are surprised is that I did not reveal this was taking place during any of that. We just kind of kept it quiet. Like we both agreed that we were going to not talk about it. And I said, I'll help you, I'll try to help you, but don't use my name. And the joke was, no problem, I want to keep my job.
Now, has there ever been, I mean, you speak about times in the book, but have you ever disagreed on a next step, a psychic feeling versus a gut feeling? Has that ever presented itself in your relationship?
You want to answer that?
Yeah. I say this openly. I didn't solve anything. What I did was I gave Bob insights, and he then took those insights and he did his job. So the same way that somebody comes to me for a private reading, or if I'm working with them in a group, they could be grieving. I could read for them. I can't heal them. I can't fix their grief. Hopefully what comes through those insights, they can utilize. They can work on their stuff in the same way that he did.
Yeah, before I give my answer, are there any FBI people in this audience right now? Okay, I don't see any hands going up. So I think, where?
Just plug your ears for a moment.
All right. Well, yeah, hold your ears. So I think I want to be clear. I never once broke the law or violated anybody's rights. But the FBI has a lot of rules, do they not? A lot of policies, and a lot of people have to approve things before you can go to the bathroom in the FBI. So there were times when John would say, do this.
Like, now's the time.
Now's the time. And early on, I would say, if I do this, I'm going to get seriously jammed up, and I wouldn't. And when I wouldn't take that action, it resulted in a missed opportunity or a worse event. As our years unfolded, I never questioned it. And you'll see there's a case in the book where John, at midnight, we were looking for a little boy, 5-year-old boy that was missing. John called me up, as he does, like an electrical storm, give me information. And he said, you must go here right now at midnight. And I thought, I'm going to get fired for this. And he said, if you don't go out there right now, you're not going to find this little boy. So I didn't question it. So that's how I evolved with him.
Now, John, do you ever take any hesitation and say, hey, it's midnight, maybe I shouldn't make that phone call?
No.
No, he doesn't.
No,
No,
not when we're working on something. So I'm never going to enter someone's vibration without their consent, right? It's never okay to read for somebody if they didn't give you consent or permission. We had an open dialogue about cases that he was working on. So it was like, if you get anything else, just like reach out to me. And in that one instance, I had just landed at LaGuardia Airport, and I had just gotten into my car, and I was bombarded, because initially I didn't get anything on that case. And the entire flight, it was like working on my head, and I just couldn't get it out of my brain. The dad in me kicked in. And then it was like I landed and the floodgates energetically happened, and then I called him, and it happened to be midnight.
It seems on both ends when I'm reading this book, there's a little bit of frustration. You're frustrated because you have this overwhelming amount of information to give, and you're frustrated because you have so much information to deal with. How did you deal with that?
Communication, I think.
Yeah, and I think
for me.
Yeah, and I think on my end, the analogy I've used, and we've done a lot of interviews, is before we all had GPS today, where it says, hey, turn left here. Remember the old days when you got lost, you pulled on the side of the road, asked a stranger, hey, how do I get somewhere? And they say, hey, go down here about 4 miles, look for the red barn and turn left. Remember that? John, in some of the cases, would say...
Here it would be Dairy Barn.
It would be what?
Keep going. The Long Island reference. Staying on brand.
Yeah.
Okay. So the point is, he was like that for me in some of the cases, right? Hey, Sheila. He would say, look for this. And then when I saw it, I knew I was on the right path. Right?
Now, there was some kind of tells that not only were you sharing this process, but also you were picking up on things. There were certain aromas that you were starting to recognize. Could you describe
the
that?
fun part
How
for
was
me.
that for you, and how was that for you?
For me, it was pretty fun. Well, I had to make sure he didn't think he was crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you just took the words out of my mouth. I thought I was losing my mind at times. I thought I was imagining things. Things started happening that I couldn't explain related to certain cases, and I started experiencing things. One night in a hotel room, particularly, some weird thing happened, and it was undeniable. So I do not profess to be psychic, but I will tell you, I don't know if it's because he's radioactive and I got some of it. Certain things started happening. So at first I was very fearful of it, but then I realized through him, this is nothing to be afraid of. Accept this for what it was. And when I did, I understood how to use that.
John, how does it feel hearing that after, I think he said wring your neck? He wanted to wring your neck.
You've covered this already.
Yeah, there's a lot of people over the years that have wanted to do that exact same thing. You know, whether it be a nun or a priest or you name it. I've had a line of people. I do my job. My job is to help lead people better than I find them, raise awareness and teach. So to be a student of the universe, it means you're always evolving, right? He's a student of the universe. He's always evolving. It's fun for me to listen to him in these interviews use words like energy, the universe.
When it comes to solving these cases, so some of these cases were solved or at least moved forward, how does that feel from your end and also from yours? I'm going to start with you, John.
Oh, I love validation. I mean, validation to a medium is like, that is what you want. And to see the validation happen for him, and you know, we kept this private for a lot of years. And in the one case that was the midnight case where I said you have to go out there was a press conference that happened. And for the first time ever in the 3 decades of us working together, I felt from him, not that he verbalized it, he didn't say a word, nothing, but I felt from him that he wasn't validated in what his pursuit was, which was justice, like a passionate pursuit of justice. And you know, other people over the years I've witnessed taking credit for what he's actually done. And this was this moment where there was a press conference and I mustered up the energy and I said, hey, Bob, I said, if you want to step in front of the cameras and acknowledge actually what took place, I'll back you up. And then I was like, and then he was like, no, I'm good. And I was like, okay, good.
Okay.
But you know what? That feeling never went away. And the need for validation, not that he's ever verbalized this to me, was something that I recognized. And maybe in the last 2 years or so, like I kind of like also recognized in my world, like where I've never looked for people in my circle to validate me and what I do. I just kind of just did what I did. I think energetically or astrologically, whatever, the stars aligned. And I was like, I think it's important for people to know that there are people like Bob out there that are nameless and faceless, that are in pursuit of justice for victims, and nobody here will ever know. Nobody will ever know what they did or what they sacrificed in order to try to bring people to justice and keep us safe. And I think that's what this book does.
And how did it feel to have those cases brought to justice, knowing that not only did you use your skills from the FBI, but you used another tool?
Yes, so the goal of any of our investigations is to bring closure to them, right? And there certainly is, I don't know, there's value in that, right? But what you'll see in the book is, despite my best efforts and the best efforts of many of my colleagues, you can work as hard as you can, and sometimes you're not successful in solving those cases. There's a difference between knowing something and proving it, and that's often where the challenge becomes. But to John's point, when all of you read the book, I hope the takeaway is, number one, I hope you realize how much we cared about these cases and the victims in these cases and their families, right? I worked every one of them as if these people were somebody I would care about. God forbid I find myself in a situation, I would want the investigator to invest the same energy. And the second part that John alluded to is there's a sacrifice, right? And the sacrifice is professional, personal, sacrifice to time away from my own children for extended periods of time, for months at a time, going overseas, from my wife. There's a cost to all that. So that's one of the things I hope you all take away from it.
Now, even with solved cases, I want to ask John, is there closure on both ends here and also in the spiritual world?
So I could speak not just from the book, but from just 40 years now of doing this. When people come through, they're not looking for us to avenge their passings. Mm-hmm. They want us to focus on the connections family-wise and not get stuck in the moment that they crossed. Like, that to me has been like the theme. They don't want us to focus solely on the moment that they passed. They want us to be open and allow them to be part of our lives and our journey as we're evolving through that. So I've never had somebody say, I'm so happy that case got solved, right? They've never come through saying that. Now, I've had readings where people have come through and given me information, and in those cases, it's to the family. And the family would then go back to the investigators, separate from Bob, mm-hmm. and give them information where they would say stuff like, well, only somebody at the crime scene would know that, right? But not because they wanted their family to get stuck on solving the case. They wanted the family to have some type of validation that it was them so that they can move through the actual process.
Now, Bob, when did you start seeing your guard come down? I mean, in the book, there was several, I'm just going to say, on-target things that John had said. When did you start noticing that?
Well, the first day I met him, it felt like, you know, a snow globe, when somebody shakes it up? It felt like he took my snow globe and shook it up, and my whole worldview perspective of everything, there was a lot of things that I couldn't understand. And I'm the kind of guy that when I don't understand something, I need to ask more questions, right? Mm-hmm. Like a magic trick. I love magic, but I want to know how it's done. And I certainly didn't want to be a fool. And I remember after that very first meeting, like marinating, did I do anything that he could have got this information from? The only thing he knew was I was Bob from the FBI. He didn't know, the things he came through with that day were unbelievable. And then secondly, on that very first day, I put him on the phone with one of the victim's daughters, and inadvertently, John started reading me. And he shared with me information about my family that I never knew. Like, you know, there's skeletons in everybody's family, right? Mm-hmm. So, and then, you know, my dad is Archie Bunker, my mom is Edith, kind of thing. And so, so I wrestled, and I remember calling my pop. It was about 4 days later because I couldn't sleep. And I'm like, I can't tell him. And then I felt like the other side was like, you better tell him. And my dad was a unique guy. He's not an emotional guy except for anger. And I remember that day, I called him, and John had connected to my father's father who passed, and there was a message from my father. And if I talked to my dad, well, he's no longer here, but we would talk about three things: the New York Mets, the weather, and how much he hated whoever the president was. That was our relationship. So it wasn't like, hey, I love you, Dad. That wasn't the thing. But that day on the phone, I said, Dad, I got to talk to you. I said, I'm working a case, and a week ago, I went and talked to a psychic, and I went like this, and he went, what? And I said, I know, I just need to tell you something. And I then proceeded to describe what happened. And on the phone, my father started crying. So for me, that was, whoa. And then to your question, I kept going back to John with that case. And the information he provided me was so specific and so tangible that some of the things were actionable. I could take action. But then he forecasted things that were going to happen. And when they did, it couldn't be denied. So I think it was that very first case that galvanized the relationship, but then when that thing unexpectedly led to the next case, and that was the crazy part. I never came to him with the second case. I'm talking about the first case, and he starts asking me about something. I'm like, there's nothing in this file. And I go, oh my God, he's talking about another case. That's how it unfolded.
Now, you also had, I would say, a connection with your father, because he told you not to work with police.
Yes.
But you did.
So I just went right to the FBI.
How did this partnership, if anything, affected the relationship that you had with your father?
Well, I really didn't have a relationship with my dad. And, you know, I live by 3 words: communicate, appreciate, and validate. And sometimes you have to communicate that you are kind of done with the circumstance or relationship, and appreciate where that relationship has brought you, and validate that we're kind of done. So I was pretty much no contact with my dad by the end of his life. So he was unaware of the physical world that any of this was going on. Even while it was going on, I didn't really share that with him. But I think for me, I did the work where my dad was concerned. I knew what his issues were. I knew where I weighed on that, and I felt good about it. And I felt like, as a dad, I was able to work through some of those things. So for me, I had checked off all the dad stuff. And then by the end of this book, I recognized, wow, I had some daddy issues that I was working through. And this gentleman represented the opportunity for me to work through those things. And so I hope when people read this, they're gonna go, oh, so we can learn lessons through people that come into our lives that have nothing to do with your biological family, but patterns are going to get played, right? So my dad happened to be a sun sign Aquarius. Bob happens to be a sun sign Aquarius. So they're 4 days apart in their birthday.
Know that.
Yeah, you're 4 days apart. See, I keep secrets too.
So do I.
So that journey for me was kind of like a wow as this has gone on.
What do you think he would say now?
Good job. Good job. I think he'd want to be like doing the interview.
Yeah. When it comes to some of the stakes in these readings and in this partnership, there was some, it seemed like life or death moments. How was that, seeing those visions, and how was that just taking his word and working with it? Because again, it could be life or death.
The life or death part for me, for him, was like concerning on 2 overseas occasions. Like one time, and I really didn't talk to my wife about a lot of stuff where I was doing this with him, but in this one specific case, I was like, I don't think he should go. I'm actually concerned about him not coming back, you know? And that was all kind of captured.
And I was going to tell my boss, I'm sorry, I can't go on this mission because the psychic told me it wasn't safe.
I mean, but how does it feel like he's been right so many times. He's kind of sounding the alarm bells like this might not be a good idea, but he's also giving you information about, because he knows you're going to go.
So what's worse, going into a situation that could be dangerous, or going into a situation with information that it's going to be dangerous?
You tell me.
Well, I gave you the question.
I mean, given that you're an FBI, you're going to go in anyway, but the more information, the better.
Very good. Yeah, that's the
But
answer.
I mean, did you realize while you were in it, like, wow, this was right on the money. This is dangerous.
Yeah, I think in some of the missions overseas, depending on what country, we were not allowed to have weapons in some of them. And in Afghanistan, we did, because it was a war, and I was on a plane that went down, and all kinds of crazy things happened beyond your control. And there were more than a handful of times in my life, like 9/11, where I said, all right, God, this is it. Just let it come quick and take care of my family, you know? So I think the reality is, you know, that's part of the job, and you're not going to do the job. It's part of what you do.
And how did that feel? Because at that point, you guys, you could tell you care about each other, you're friends. How does that feel, knowing that there is this danger that your friend's about to go into, and you have information to tell him?
Well, I kind of feel like I have to surrender my ego and serve, right? So that's what I do. I give the information, but I can't be responsible for whether somebody does or does not utilize it, because then it can take me off balance the next time I'm asked that question.
Oh. So my next question for you is, how has your past experience collaborating impact your life today? And we'll start with you, Bob.
Well, I think I started answering. I don't question it anymore. I don't question what I previously thought was crazy when things happen. The signs he gives me, and now our relationship is probably more personal than it ever was. Right? We talk about each other's families and our kids, and you know, he's a blessing. And you know, we could be out to dinner, and he would say, "Hey, how's this going?" I'm like, "Uh-oh." So it has been great, right? It's like I've got a special friend with this incredible ability that can help. He's my guide. He's my guide.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And same question.
Same. I mean, I feel like I have a protector. I have a big brother.
Yeah. He's called me a couple times when he was jammed
Yes,
up.
there have been some moments where I'm like, Bob, I have an issue. There's somebody that wants to decapitate me, and like, you know.
Is that same nun?
No.
Oh, okay. Whew. All right. So when it comes to the book, after you've read this, we were talking a little bit outside. Your wife had some questions for you, John. What did she say?
So when she was early on reading this, she was like, so how much of this like creative license did you guys take to make this like a page turner? I'm like, none. And she's like, no, like seriously, like some of it's got to be like fictionalized, right, to make it a better story. I'm like, no, it's nonfiction. And so I think she asked a third time. So I call Bob and I put him on speaker. I'm like, hey Bob, how much of this book is like fictionalized from your perspective in your notes? And he's like, none. He's like, dude, you were there. Why are you asking me? I go, oh, no, you're on speaker. This is for my wife's purpose. I just need you to validate that for her.
When it comes to general questions we have from the audience, I have a few here that I want to share with you.
Sure.
Bob, we're going to start with you. Do you as an FBI agent also carry burdens from previous cases?
Wow, that's a great question. I think when you're working these cases, it's important to set your emotions aside, to be objective, right? I am not a surgeon, but think about these surgeons that operate on small children, right? They have to set it aside. And for me to be effective with my job, I've got to do that intentionally. That doesn't mean there's not a hurt to it when there's a young girl who's missing or a child that's missing, or you're working at ground zero and you're seeing things, and doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. But I don't feel today like I'm carrying it. And that's one of the lessons for me. And I think there's a saying, every strength is a reverse weakness, is a converse weakness. So I was like a dog with a bone with everything, with my cases. I couldn't let things go. And that may be great as an FBI agent, but it's bad in your personal life. So I think where I'm at now, at my age, I've learned that I need to let things go. I can't carry these things. So it doesn't mean I don't remember them or some of them didn't hurt, but I don't carry them.
Now my last question, I'm going to start, this is for both of you, I'm going to start with you, John, though. Have you helped in any cases on Long Island?
Have we? I don't think so.
No, I haven't.
I don't think so. I don't think I've, not that I'm recalling.
Would you tell us?
No.
Probably not.
Okay, I tried. All right, so I believe we have some audience questions. I believe we're doing that now. Steve Morris is coming around.
Hi, John. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
So, about 25 years ago, I had a reading with you with I'm an attorney, and I had a case that was nationally known. I was on the television show 2020. And I went with my client to you.
Okay.
And it was an outstanding reading, which made me believe in what you do. But we were 30 seconds into the reading, and you stopped it immediately. You said, "Are you two guys cops?" And we said, "No, we're not law enforcement." And you explained to me and my client at that time that it was your policy not to work with law enforcement, and that you
Still is.
yeah, and that you stated at that time that you had an experience where you had worked for law enforcement and you had come up with a name.
I know the case.
Yes.
It wasn't law enforcement. It was a woman whose niece was missing.
Okay, but you said to us, you had come up with a name. It was the right name, but the wrong person. And that served as a deterrent to you. But I will let you know that in connection with that case, the information that you provided that night, I used in connection with the case.
Okay.
And ultimately, so you know, it ended up very well. This was double homicide, and my client had lost his parents, and they had been murdered by his older brother here on Long Island. And as I said, it was a nationally known case. But the information that you provided me, and I want you to know this as far as validation is concerned, was utilized by me in connection with the case. And ultimately, the district attorney of Suffolk County was on the precipice within 24 hours of indicting the older brother, and he committed suicide. The older brother committed suicide because he obtained knowledge that he was going to be indicted, because of the information that you provided me gave me a path to ask the right questions, pursue the avenues that needed to be pursued in concert with law enforcement. And it worked out ultimately very well. So I wanted to thank you for that. You did a great job. Thank you.
The case that he's referencing is there was a woman that I read at a psychic fair originally on Long Island, and then she came to me privately because her niece was missing. And during the course of the reading, I started to see who the culprit was, and I described it, and I described where they lived, and it kind of looked like it was the girl's boyfriend. So the fingers pointed to the girl's boyfriend. And then I said, I think that his name is like Michael or Mike. And she said, no, that's my son who's passed. I knew that they would be together. And I wasn't me now then. And she was like, I said, I don't think that's it. I think it's something else. And she said, no, she's with my son Michael. Like Michael, they're together. And it turned out to be Michael was the person who was responsible, and it happened to be their neighbor, not her boyfriend. And because of that, it did act as a deterrent for me. And I was like, I don't want to do that. But I'm happy that it was helpful. Thank you.
John, you said you give information to families who then go to the police. And Bob, you said you've had said some things to colleagues, and they're like, how did you know that? Did ever that turn around and you guys become suspects because of the information?
Well, I don't know about him, but I did a reading for a family. It was a group, and there was a double or triple homicide in Florida, and I gave the mom of one of the victims information, and she said, that's not true. And I said, ma'am, all I can tell you is what they're showing me. And she said, well, I'm going to tell the detectives on the case what it is that you said. And I went, you do you. The next morning, the detectives on the case called me, and their conversation began something like, only somebody at the crime scene would know what you provided them with. This is an open investigation. It was not released to the press nor to the family. And I didn't really catch what they were inferring, and I said, exactly. That prompted them to fly up to New York, where I met them. And then they realized that clearly I was not involved. And they said to me, can you work with photos? And I said, yeah, I could look at photos of people. I was like, yeah, absolutely, no problem. They said, okay, we're going to show you photos. I expected them to show me people photos. They showed me crime scene photos. In that moment, I was of no service to them moving forward. I was like, here are your photos back. I cannot help you. So the working together became not possible. This gentleman has forged a relationship with my spirit team in some way that I feel like I witness it in some weird way. Because if I'm reading for you and you ask me a question and that question is given an answer, if the client tries to ask that same question 2-3 different ways because they don't like the answer, I don't get more information. So I would have to apologize and say, I'm so sorry, they've already addressed that. This gentleman asked the question from a slightly different perspective or angle, and all of a sudden there's more information that was coming through. And that was new. I was like, well, this is different. Like, why are they
like
answering
him more now?
I don't know. I was like, why are they answering his questions? Yeah. Like, and I explained how you said that you learned how to like operate with questions with me.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say the first time I interviewed him, it was more like a witness interview, right? And then as we grew in this and evolved, so to speak, I had to learn how to ask him the right questions, because if I asked it the wrong way, it could shut him down, right? So if I were to say, hey, did Harry kill Harry Sally thing again? No. Did Harry kill Sally? It would literally shut him down.
Because of that case, I didn't want to be responsible for saying this person did it.
So I could say, did Sally know her killer? Absolutely. Was Sally in a relationship with her killer? Yes. Was Harry present when Sally passed? Yes. And he would say, Harry killed Sally. Right. Oh. So I had to be intentional. And I was, and just, if I may, you know, towards the end, it felt we had like this synchronicity, like we were like the Rolling Stones at 80 years old playing the guitar, right? And literally last week in Richmond, yeah, we were backstage like we were here, and he has a process to get ready before he comes out, and I'm giving him a space, and the woman who's running the event hands me an envelope addressed to John and I, and it turns out it was somebody who was going to attend that night who was a former detective in West Palm Beach, Florida. And of course he had an unsolved case involving an 8-year-old girl. I know nothing of this, so I'm trying to figure out what this is. At first I'm looking at it as there anthrax in it, right? I'm holding like this. I open it up, and he's kind of in his state, and all of a sudden I'm halfway through, and I'm getting to the meat of this, and he says to me, whatever you're reading right now, is there a Christy in it? And I get to the line, the 8-year-old girl who's missing, her name is Christy. And I don't ask him a single thing, because now I you know, this is how we grooved. Mm-hmm. I just sit in quiet reflection, and he just starts giving me what he's giving me. And then based upon what he gives me, now I know how to structure my questions based upon what he gives me. So.
The interrogation.
Yeah.
Thank
was
you.
wondering if energy on the other side, does it deplete over time? Like, could you solve cases from 80 years ago or something, or can you only connect with people who have passed more recently?
I can only tell you that people who have gone on like decades and decades ago can come through as accurately as somebody who passed last week, as long as the people that are living can actually validate the information. So as long as you can validate the information, they can come through. Now, if I'm doing a reading for somebody and they don't know their family, those folks aren't going to come through because it's going to go nowhere. So if I'm reading for somebody, let's say hypothetically that they're adopted and they're looking for their biological family, if I make a contact with their biological family, it lets me know that in this lifetime, they're going to meet them. Otherwise, I wouldn't get that. I've gone back, I do a lot of Zoom groups, and during one Zoom group, I had somebody whose family went back to the 1500s, and another person's family who went back to the 1700s. And out of the, let's say, 15 people that were on that specific group, there were only 3 people that enjoyed that process. And that was the 2 people that I read and myself. Everybody else was like, this is boring. But I found it fascinating. I felt like I was time traveling.
Hi there. Bob, wanted to know, how did you decide if and when to bring John into a case? And John, were there ever any cases that you said no to?
Yeah, so that's a great question. The majority of cases I worked in my career, I don't want to say I didn't need John's help, but I had things I could pursue, right? I had physical evidence, I had witnesses, I had leads, and you make cases based on evidence. I don't go to the Department of Justice, the United States Attorney's Office, say, hey, I have got a psychic telling me this is the guy, right? I say, here's the evidence. To your question, it was those cases where I ran everything to ground, right? Where there was nothing left, or in some cases when I was faced with a really daunting task where sometimes I felt like I don't know if it was my own intuition, I felt like what I was about to walk into wasn't exactly real. Like sometimes what you see is not what you get. And the FBI is good about that. Go here and do this. And sometimes you don't know the whole story.
I don't know if I ever said no. Did I ever say no to you?
No, I don't think you said no. I think for me the frustrating part, there were times when I would say, hey, I need your help on this. He'd go, yeah, I'm getting nothing. But then in the same token, now he's telling me about something else that I didn't bring to him. I've learned that, and this is interesting as we do these interviews, at the time when you're going through things, and I think this is reflective of all your lives, right? You don't understand things, and you're like, why? Why is this happening? And you get frustrated. I certainly did. When I look back now over those 30 years, I can tell you honestly, all those things happened the way they were supposed to, right? And it's kind of like that thing when you're going through those hard times in life and you go, how am I getting through this? You realize when you come to the end of it, you say, you know what? I had to go through all those bad things to get to this great thing. So I think that's what I learned in this journey.
I also learned about sports. I learned that Whitey Bulger is not a baseball player.
At what point and why did you decide to put your story in print? Because you had stated that most of your relationship, it was basically secret. So now it's out in the open, and even with you, Bob, now you're exposed to the FBI, that you're working with John.
Yeah, well, the FBI had to go through this and approve it. It took them 9 months to approve the book. But that's a great question. I think for me, I wrote the first draft of the book, I guess about 8 years ago. And for me, it was more like a journaling exercise to kind of like put it on paper, and how I met him was a fascinating story. And then towards the end of my career, John and I were reflecting on this, and we said, we've done a lot together. This would be good. But personally, I will tell you, I wrote it for my kids, right? My kids sacrificed a lot. Dad wasn't home a lot. And I wanted them to say, you know what, Dad being gone, it makes sense now. And I wanted to acknowledge them in the book. And while this, if I may, John and I worked so hard on this book, but I want to acknowledge the young lady in the corner, Miss Natasha Stoyner. If you could stand up, please. Natasha is an incredible, gifted writer, and she worked with my sloppy writing and John's writing, and she helped us masterfully weave this story together. So I want to thank you for that, Natasha.
Thanks, Natasha.
Thank you.
I did read the book, just finished it yesterday, and it's absolutely phenomenal. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And I should, full disclosure, like you, Bob, I've been a long-time skeptic when it comes to people who claim to have psychic ability. To this day, when I hear about somebody with that claim, I poo-poo it,
Yeah.
with one exception, and that's you, John.
Yeah.
And my wife and I have seen you, I don't know, dozens and dozens of times whenever you appear on Long Island.
That's great.
Thank you.
And I salute you not just for your really incredible gift, but you're also a very kind, compassionate guy, and people who have seen you have seen that part of you. What really surprised me about the book is that while you were traveling around the world for decades doing what you do, you had this other side of your life that you kept secret. And how do you anticipate your life changing and your career changing now that this is out in the open?
I don't. I really honestly don't. I don't really think a lot's going to change. I fell into a trap in 1999. I was part of a double-blind study, multiple double-blind studies at the University of Arizona, and myself and a number of other mediums. And I felt like when that book and research came out, I was going to have like the credibility and go, there you go, there's the science. And instead what I learned is that the people who are non-believers and cynical, not skeptical, but cynical, attacked the scientist and the scientific community instead of going, oh, there's data, let's look at the data. And I won't fall into that trap with this. And I have to say openly that I'm really not into solving crime. And I say I didn't work for the FBI, I worked for a different three-letter organization, I worked for the BOB. And even when I've gotten pulled into a case, like I was in San Luis Obispo and had a big event, and it was right when the mudslides were happening. And a police officer stood up in front of everybody and said, will you help us try to find people? And if she asked me that privately, I probably would have said no. And I probably would have said, it's not really what I do. Because it's not what I do. It's not where my focus and passion is. But it was in front of everybody, so I felt uncomfortable, and I was like, I can try. And then she showed up at the end of the event, and I said, I'll try to help you, but I have one caveat. I was like, I need you to work with him. And I never talked to her again. Bob took that case over, and
we found some of the mudslide victims. Yeah.
But thank you for your words. That means a lot. Thank you.
Hi, John, this is for you. Earlier on, you referenced that at times there are objects involved as well as people. But in the case of people who come through, do you hear their voices, or does it come through as an energy source? How is it that you established that communication?
So it's really just thoughts, right? It's like I have other thoughts that are happening simultaneously with my own thoughts. So not like schizophrenia, for real. It's just like I have, so if you've ever read something and then you have another extraneous thought that pops in, I'm paying attention to that other thought. So that's how I'll hear names or what it sounds like. And then I get downloads of feelings, and then I get images. So what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, and what I'm feeling, I interpret in my frame of reference. And it just like flows. And sometimes I'm just in the zone, and I feel like I can't get it out. Like I can't get all of it out fast enough, which is why I'll speak very quickly and then repeat what I'm seeing over and over again, and then try to validate the validation so that I'm making sure that I'm getting everything out in the way that I'm perceiving it. But I'm not hearing an out loud voice.
So I know earlier you mentioned, John, that there was an instance where you felt that, you know, Bob was going to be going overseas and it was going to be dangerous and it might not be good for him, and you tried to kind of warn him. When you have kind of those psychic episodes where you're seeing like a future event, is it that no matter what it's going to happen, or like by warning him, you know, this is going to happen X, Y, Z, like does he have the ability to maybe stop it? Like, when you see psychic things, like, does it happen no matter what, or can you interfere?
So here's my philosophy over 40 years, that if I get something negative in a session, the reason why I'm getting it is so that we can either prevent it from happening or better deal with what the outcome is. And there have been plenty of times where I've done a reading for someone, and then right after that, a very negative event takes place, and they'll wonder, why didn't you tell me? It's because I wasn't told. It's not like I know it and I'm not saying it. I think one of the greatest examples of that is I did a reading in Phoenix, Arizona, and I read for a family, and there was an older woman, we'll call her the grandma, the mom of the family, and they kept giving me a date over and over and over and over about the date. And the way they were giving me this date with such a sense of urgency, and that the entire family was going to be there for this, I thought it was going to be like a surprise party. So I was like, you know what, we're just going to leave this here, and you let me know what this date turns out to be. So fast forward, it's October and I'm in San Diego, and this woman walks up to, I was doing a book signing at the end of the event, and I was very happy that I was sitting. The woman says, "You remember me?" And I went, "I don't." She's like, "Well, you read me." And now I'm like thinking about that night, and I did not read her that night, and I'm like, "I'm so sorry, I don't really remember." She's like, "You'll remember me." She's like, "I'm the lady from Phoenix with the date." And I was like, "Oh my God, I do remember you." And then I very confidently said, "Surprise party?" Hold on. She said, "No, it's when my son was murdered." Yep. And I like looked at her and I was like, and she said, "I came
Surprise.
here." Yeah, she said, "I came here to say thank you." And I went, "Thank you?" I go, "Why are you saying thank you?" She goes, "You're the only thing that got me through that." She said, "Because you told me my entire family was coming for that event." And I was like, "Can I ask you a question?" And she's like, "Yeah." I go, "Why aren't you mad?" And she's like, "What?" I said, "Why aren't you mad at me for not getting what the event was?" And her exact words to me were, "That's not up to you, that's up to God. I'll deal with him when I get there." So I didn't know what the event was, but I just knew it was significant and that everybody was coming for it.
Hi, John.
Hey.
So, Bob, you mentioned that John is like your guide.
Is what?
You trust him. You trust
your
him
guide.
completely.
Oh, okay. Yep.
You're at that place. My question is for John. When you get stuck, what's the process for a psychic to be unstuck, or what's your guide? What's your mechanism?
When I get stuck, it depends upon what kind of stuck I am, right? So if I'm working on something and I'm like it's like personal for me, I'm probably going to turn to an astrologer and look for what the lesson is. Like, what am I supposed to be learning right now? And they could look at your natal chart and then look at the transits that are taking place and give you a window into what's taking place and what's happening now. And I'll actually use that as like a process for my clients. If somebody's stuck on a dynamic, a problem, if they feel stagnant in some way, that they can't get past something, I'll ask them to work with an astrologer. And the difference between a psychic, a medium, and an astrologer is the astrologer needs your birth date, time you were born, and then your location to do your natal chart. And then I like to use astrology like it's an MRI. I have a healthcare background, and I kind of like to have the astrologer know, here's the entrance point for the reading. I want to know about this. So it gives them something to focus on. So they don't just talk about your personality and who you are. You're giving them that place. So you can go and say, "Hey, on December 10th, 1997, somebody in my family was killed. I want to know, what was that supposed to be lesson-wise for me? What am I supposed to, because I'm still reeling from that ripple effect of that one event." So that's what I would probably do. My guides are pretty intense, so the stuck part wouldn't happen too long with them because they would be insistent over and over again to make sure that I pay attention to what they're showing me.
Hi, Bob. This question is kind of guided towards you as being law enforcement. When you have worked on something that's been extremely tragic and you have these you're very emotionally attached, and it's been very tragic, and it affects your home life in some way. How do you navigate those waters and let go of it? I know you kind of touched on it earlier.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I don't think I was good at that, right? I think I kept a lot of stuff inside. My wife thought I was ridiculous for having John as a friend, and to this day probably feels that way. The only time that I can tell you, well, of course, I grew up, hey, a guy doesn't have emotions, you keep your head down, you move forward, right? My pop told me that. The first time I remember ever feeling something was the 1-year anniversary of 9/11, and that like destroyed me. And then one of the last cases was with this 5-year-old boy. I never felt, and John felt that emotion too. So there are times that you can be as compartmentalized as you try to be, and it's still going to bleed over, right? But it wasn't easy. So I don't know if I was so great at it. I know when I was working the case, I was good at handling it at the time. I think I probably didn't realize I was still carrying it. So good question.
If a soul has been reincarnated, would they still be able to come through to you?
They would, and I think that was probably one of my biggest issues. I had an experience when I was 12 where I was taken to Puerto Rico, first time leaving like the United States to like Maine, And walking through Old San Juan at the age of 12, I became paralyzed in the middle of one of the streets and was like, I was here before, but I wasn't John. And it made no sense. Like, that made no sense to me what that meant. And my aunt was with me, and she turned around and said, what are you talking about? And I go, I don't know, there's something at the end of this block with birds and nuns. Can we go look? Go to the end of the block. There's like remnants of a convent that has a plaque that said a miracle happened there next to like a bird sanctuary. So the 12-year-old looks to the adult like, why do I know this? And she kind of dismissed me in a pretty abrupt way because she couldn't explain it. So I kept that quiet for 3 years. At the age of 15, this whole world opened up for me. And then I learned about past life therapy, past life regression therapy, past life recall, that exact moment that I had. And then years later, my mom died. And I went into complete panic because I was 19 when she passed. And I thought, well, what if I live to 90? That's a lot of Earth years, right? I know that there's reincarnation. Like, when I get there, I want to see her. I don't want to get there and have them be like, oh, you just missed her.
Yeah, right.
You know,
Right.
she's in Jersey now. Like, so I did what I would always do. I looked for data. I looked for research. I looked for the people that do past life regression therapy. And over the years of talking to those people, here's what I learned. If you take this mug and this entirety of the water that's in this mug represents our consciousness, you only need a cap, you know, like a bottle cap full of water to have a lifetime. So we can still connect with people who have crossed, even if there's aspects of us. An easier analogy, soldiers in the Army. If you have soldiers that retire, if they go on assignment, you don't stop calling it the Army. It's still the Army. So you still have the consciousness that you can connect with.
Okay, that's good to know.
Thank you.
How you doing? John, I know you're just saying about your that your guides can be very persistent.
Sure.
And I have seen you at other events, and I remember seeing you struggle with somebody who like is just not getting it, but it seems to get more and more specific the more you have to struggle. Like, how does that work with what you're seeing that it gets more and more specific like that? Because I remember it was like, it's this side of the arena, it's only in this section, and then all of a sudden it's these 3 rows. No, wait, it's the 3rd seat over. Like, how does that work?
It's just my process. It's
yeah.
So if I'm getting information from my guides, it feels like if I'm in a shower, the water is coming from above and it's coming down and it's warm. Like it feels like it feels comfortable and familiar. When I'm getting information from someone's family, it's like somebody has the garden hose from outside and they're shooting from me across the bathroom. So I could just follow the trajectory of the water of where it goes. So that's why I could be like, I'm in that section, I'm in that direction. And then the information usually takes us there. But oftentimes, people don't like to acknowledge the information. And at that point, I have to really sometimes I feel like I'm a dentist, not a medium, and I have to pull their teeth to get them to acknowledge. And it's usually because they don't want to validate something that's private, or they don't want to hear from that specific person, or they just don't think they would say that, and they don't understand that the medium's process comes into play. And one of the things that I pride myself on is not giving emotion as information, right? And I take out of the equation all of the normal things. Like, if I say to you guys, who here identifies with butterflies as a sign? Raise your hand. Who here identifies with cardinals as your sign? Raise your hand. Where are the 11 people in the room? Where are the people that look at the clock and it's the same time and you kept getting pulled to it? Where are the people with the license plate talking to you? Right? Where's the song on the radio people? Where are the people that find feathers? Where are the people that find pennies, dimes, and quarters? Every medium knows that these are the ways that your loved ones and friends are going to communicate. So for me, when I'm watching somebody read and they're like, who here has a... To me, I'm looking for not that. But a lot of times the clients just want that. They want to know that that cardinal on the window was grandma, you know? And I'm talking about what's inside the kitchen drawer.
John, did you ever have a family come to you and wanted to connect hopefully with their loved one, but that loved one was also a psychic medium? And was that interaction any different with you?
The one that's passed?
The past, yes.
No, I actually had that happen. And matter of fact, it was a medium that I knew. And at the end of the event, the girl that I read for, she was like, "Do you know who you were talking to?" And I was like, "Phyllis." And they were like, "No, but do you know who that was?" And I went, "Phyllis." That's all I knew. And then she had to tell me that it was actually a psychic that I knew from when I was a kid that I worked at the psychic fairs with. But I didn't get it that way. I just got it as I saw my cousin Phyllis, who lives in Florida, and I was like, "Is her name Phyllis?" And she was like, "Yes." And then the rest of the reading happened. So again, objectivity is really, really important, and I probably would have gotten pulled out of the reading if I knew it was the Phyllis that I knew. You're welcome.
Hi, this question is for Bob. You're retired, I'm guessing.
I am.
Do you ever
Wait, did you
get
say retired or tired?
retired?
I am.
Both maybe. So do you ever get contacted by anybody from the FBI and say, look, we need John's help, so can you talk to John and see if he'll come and help us?
Yeah, well, the book came out 7 days ago. But I can tell you that this is probably our fourth event we've done. In each of the events, we've got 2, 3, 4 people who grab me and pull me by my sleeve and saying, I've got this case. So clearly you have a case because you're raising your hand. Yeah, go ahead.
So you said it took 9 months for you to get approval through the FBI channels. Anybody in those channels ever say to you, well, wait, we have this case, what about this case, what about this case?
No, so it's called pre-publication review. All they do is very sterilely look through the book and run the names, so it's not like you're saying. But I suspect now that the book is getting traction, many of my former colleagues are going to be calling me, probably on the down low, right, saying, hey, Bob, I got this thing. I suspect that's going to happen. It's starting, all of a sudden I've got more LinkedIn and Facebook friends than I ever had before. Yeah, so.
We have time for one more question.
So this question is for Bob. I'm wondering whether you ever encountered the difficulty of establishing probable cause to get a federal judge to sign a warrant that was in part based on information that came from John.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I'll just say it like this. John never gave me evidence, but he gave me direction as to where I might acquire that access or the doors I might knock on to get the probable cause for that affidavit. So it was never a situation where, and you sound like you're in law enforcement? You're a lawyer, okay. I don't know why I'm talking to this guy, he's a lawyer. Yeah, but you know the process, right? So I had to establish evidence to support those affidavits, but yeah, good. Can I ask one thing?
Yeah.
A question that comes up all the time that I think is good for this audience is, have I, in any of my cases, ever brought family members of any of the victims in the cases to John? Is that a good question? Yeah. Well, it just so happened, and she's going to be mad at me, there's a young lady in the audience here named Sheila. Sheila was a family member of a double homicide case, very sad, and we kind of had some thoughts as to what it was, and she and her brother at the time came and asked me for my help through John Miller, and I started kind of covertly behind the scenes doing my thing, and then one day I brought Sheila to meet John. Do you want to comment on that real quick?
Hi, Bob.
Hi, Sheila.
Well, so Bob called me up one morning. We were investigating this double homicide, and I was having difficulty getting the case prosecuted. I'm a former prosecutor. I was working with my brother, who's a former prosecutor. So we decided that we would do a private investigation, and through my contacts, through John Miller, I was introduced to you. And you started helping me put together pieces of the case, and very generous with your time. And especially one morning, Bob calls me up and says, what are you doing? And I said, well, I had just had a baby at the time. So I said, well, I'm home with my 4-month-old. He said, well, I'm going to pick you up. We have to be someplace. And I said, I can't take my 4-month-old with me. What do you mean? He said, no, you can take your kid with you. It's fine. And I was like, what kind of FBI agent is asking me to go with him someplace?
I'm a special agent.
Yeah, right. I was like, what is this about? But I went, I grabbed my kid, I packed up his diapers, I went, and he drives me to your studio, John, your studio in Queens. And on the way, he tells me that he's introducing me to John Edward. And I'm like, okay, what about my kid? He's like, the kid is fine. You're good. You're good. And then, having absolutely no idea that we were going to go do this, we showed up at your studio, and you were clearly amazingly helpful with the case, which is part of the book, chapter 18. And we did form a connection about fathers in that experience, which I didn't know until I read the book. I know that my father came through in the reading, but after reading the book, I learned that it connected also to both of your fathers.
Yes.
I found that fascinating.
Thank
so,
you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And it was instrumental in breaking the case. Absolutely instrumental.
Wow.
There you go,
Thank
John.
you.
It's a great way to end this. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming here. John Edward, Robert Hilland. The book is Chasing Evil. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsday Studios. Again, thank you.